I still remember the exact moment everything changed. There, I stood at Honolulu International Airport, boarding pass clutched in my trembling hand, watching my family, the people I'd supported for years, walk away from me. The Hawaiian sun streamed through the terminal windows, catching the glint in my sister Elaine's eyes as she delivered the words that would forever alter our relationship. Sorry, Natalie. This trip is only for family. Only for family, as if I wasn't family. As if the $22,000 I'd spent on this healing vacation meant nothing. As if the nearly $70,000 I'd poured into their lives over the past 2 years was just what I owed them for existing. My brother Jason avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by his phone screen. My parents rolled their luggage past me without hesitation, as though I were just another stranger in the crowded terminal. And I stood frozen, my chest tightening as I watched them board the plane to paradise, on my dime. That moment didn't just break my heart. It awakened something in me that had been dormant for too long. My self-respect. 1 month later, when their bills started piling up and they came crawling back with desperate pleas for help, I finally had my answer ready. Just one line that I'd been rehearsing since that day at the airport. Only for family, remember? Their calls flooded my phone for days after that. But for the first time in years, I didn't pick up. I just watched the notifications light up my screen, finally feeling in control of my own life again. This is my story. Not just of betrayal, but of reclaiming my worth, one difficult decision at a time. I was always the responsible one. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Buffalo, I watched my parents struggle with finances, making just enough to keep us comfortable but never enough to feel secure. While Elaine dreamed of becoming a famous actress, and Jason coasted through school on charm alone, I was the one with the savings account, the straight A's, and the practical plans. Natalie is our rock, my mother would tell relatives at family gatherings, her hand squeezing my shoulder with pride. Back then, I thought it was a compliment. By 32, I had built myself a respectable life. After graduating with honors in finance, I'd worked my way up to senior financial analyst at one of Buffalo's top firms. I had married young, too. Young, to my college sweetheart Mark. Our divorce 3 years ago had been amicable but painful, leaving me with an emptiness I tried to fill by throwing myself into work, and unfortunately, into solving my family's never-ending problems. My apartment overlooked Delaware Park, nothing fancy but mine alone, a quiet space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a small balcony where I'd drink coffee on Sunday mornings. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but it was stable, predictable, safe, until it wasn't. Nat, I hate to ask, but I'm in a bind. Elaine's voice had a practiced tremor the first time she called for money. It was a Tuesday evening in March, almost 3 years ago. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone lit up. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately setting aside, my work. My car broke down completely. The mechanic says it's the transmission and I need $2,800 to fix it. I can't get to auditions without it, and if I miss this callback on Friday, I'll never forgive myself. Her voice cracked. "I promise I'll pay you back when I book something." I knew she wouldn't. Elaine had been about to book something big since she dropped out of community college 10 years ago. But I also knew she needed transportation. "I'll transfer it tonight," I said. "Send me the mechanic's information." "You're a lifesaver, Nat." Seriously, that was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, Jason called about rent. Then my parents needed help with property taxes. Each time, the requests came wrapped in promises of repayment, in stories of temporary setbacks that would surely resolve soon. By the time Hannah, my best friend since college, noticed what was happening, I'd already given them over $40,000. "This isn't normal, Nat," Hannah said over brunch at our favorite cafe near the park. Her fork punctuated the air as she spoke. "They're all adults with jobs. Why are you bankrolling their lives?" I stirred my coffee, watching the cream create perfect spirals. "They're family. They'd do the same for me." Hannah's eyebrows rose so high they nearly disappeared into her curly bangs. "Would they, though? Has any one of them ever helped you when you needed it?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. During my divorce, when I was an emotional wreck, Elaine had been too busy with auditions to talk. Jason had borrowed money that same month for a business venture that mysteriously never materialized. My parents had simply told me they knew I would land on my feet. Hannah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm just worried about you. You're giving, and what are you getting back?" "It's not about getting something back," I said, though the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. It should be about balance, Hannah replied. Relationships can't survive when they're completely one-sided. I nodded, but didn't change anything. The requests continued, and I continued saying yes. Yes to helping Elaine with her credit card debt. Yes to covering Jason's car insurance when he lost his third job that year. Yes to replacing my parents' broken furnace last winter. I told myself I was being generous. I told myself I was being loving. But deep down, I was afraid. Afraid that without these financial ties, my family might have no reason to keep me in their lives at all. Then came the Hawaii idea. It was my therapist, Dr. Karen, who suggested I needed boundaries. What if, instead of giving them money directly, you planned something meaningful for all of you? Something that could rebuild your relationships on more than just financial dependence? The thought struck a chord. A vacation. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere we could talk and reconnect away from the stress of everyday life. Somewhere like Hawaii, where none of us had ever been. I spent weeks planning it. I researched the best island, Maui, found a stunning 5-bedroom villa with an infinity pool overlooking the ocean, and mapped out activities that would appeal to everyone. Snorkeling for Jason, spa days for Elaine, cultural tours for my parents, and quiet sunset moments where maybe, just maybe, we could have honest conversations about our future as a family. When I presented the idea during Sunday dinner at my parents' house, their reaction seemed encouraging. Hawaii? My mother's eyes widened. Linda at my book club just went. She said, "It was magnificent." 5-star all the way? Elaine asked, suddenly interested. Top-rated villa, private chef for 2 nights, premium excursions, I confirmed. Jason whistled low. Sounds expensive? I'm covering it, I said. All of it. Consider it my gift to us. There was a pause, and then my father cleared his throat. That's very generous, Natalie. I beamed, interpreting their reactions as enthusiasm. So you'll all come? I thought we'd go in May before tourist season really hits. They exchanged glances. A split-second communication I didn't fully understand at the time. Count us in, Elaine said, raising her wine glass. To family time in paradise. We all clinked glasses, and I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the wine. This was it, the fresh start we needed. The ocean breezes would wash away years of unspoken resentments, and the spectacular sunsets would ignite new understanding between us. I had no idea that I was funding my own heartbreak. The morning of our flight, I was practically floating. I'd packed and repacked my suitcase 3 times, making sure I had everything we might need. Extra sunscreen, first aid supplies, printed confirmations for all our activities. I'd even bought matching straw hats for all of us, a cheesy tourist move that I hoped would make us laugh together. My phone pinged with a text from Elaine. Meet at airport, Terminal 3. Everyone running late. See you there. I frowned slightly. The original plan was for Jason to pick everyone up, stopping at my place last since I lived closest to the airport. But plans change, I told myself. No big deal. I arrived at the airport 2 hours early, checking in and finding our gate. I texted the group chat. Checked in already. I'm at gate 22B whenever you all arrive. No response. 1 hour before boarding, my anxiety began to climb. Where were they? I called Elaine, but it went straight to voicemail. Same with Jason and my parents. 45 minutes before boarding, I spotted them. All 4 walking together toward the gate, rolling luggage behind them. Relief flooded through me. There you are, I called out, waving. I was getting worried. They approached slowly, and something in their expressions made my stomach twist. Elaine stepped slightly ahead of the others, her designer sunglasses perched on her head, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Natalie, she said, her voice carrying that sugary tone she used when she wanted something. There's been a slight change of plans. I glanced between them. What do you mean? We've been talking, and we think... She paused, looking back at the others for support. My brother nodded almost imperceptibly. We think this trip should just be us. The words didn't make sense at first. Us? Who's us? Mom, Dad, Jason, and me, she said, her voice hardening slightly. We rarely get time together, just the 4 of us. The terminal seemed to tilt around me. But I planned this trip. For all of us. I paid for everything. And we're so grateful, she said, reaching out to squeeze my arm. I stepped back involuntarily. You've always been so generous, Nat. But this time, we need this to be just our core family. Core family? I repeated, my voice rising. What am I then? Elaine sighed as if I was being difficult on purpose. You know what I mean? You've always been independent, doing your own thing. We need this time to strengthen our bonds. My throat tightened as the truth dawned on me. So you're going on the vacation I paid for? Without me? You'll be reimbursed, Jason finally spoke up, not meeting my eyes. Eventually, the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. First-class passengers were invited to board, the tickets I had purchased. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. We planned this together. My name is on everything. The villa, the reservations, all taken care of, Elaine said smoothly. We called and had everything transferred. They were very accommodating. Of course they were. I had paid for the premium package with full flexibility. My parents stood slightly behind my siblings, my mother examining her boarding pass, my father staring at the floor. Neither looked at me. Mom? Dad? I pleaded. You're okay with this? My mother shrugged. It was Elaine's idea, but it does make sense, dear. You're so busy with work anyway. The gate agent called for priority boarding. My family picked up their carry-ons. This is crazy, I said, tears threatening. I don't even get a say? Elaine stepped closer, lowering her voice. Sorry, Natalie. This trip is only for family. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen as they handed their boarding passes to the gate agent. Jason glanced back. Once, a flicker of something, guilt perhaps, crossing his face before he followed the others down the jetway. I watched through the large terminal windows as their plane taxied and eventually took off, carrying them to the paradise I had dreamed of sharing with them. Only when the plane was a tiny speck in the sky did I allow myself to sink into one of the uncomfortable airport chairs. My unused boarding pass crumpled in my hand. A cleaning staff member approached, concern on her face. Miss, are you all right? I wasn't. But I nodded anyway, gathering my dignity along with my single suitcase. I waited until I reached the privacy of my car in the parking garage before the sobs finally tore through me, violent and raw. That evening, I sat in my empty apartment staring at my phone. No calls, no texts, not even a landed safely message. Just silence. In a daze, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The damage was clear. $22,342.67 charged to my credit card for a vacation I wouldn't experience. I had even paid extra for travel insurance in case anything went wrong. The irony wasn't lost on me. I called Hannah, the words tumbling out between hiccuping sobs as I recounted what had happened. Those absolute monsters, she breathed when I finished. Nat, this is beyond taking advantage. This is cruel. I feel so stupid, I whispered. No, Hannah's voice was firm. You are not stupid. You are kind and generous, and they exploited that. There's a difference. What do I do now? I asked, feeling more lost than I ever had. Hannah was quiet for a moment. First, you let yourself feel this. All of it. The hurt, the anger, everything. And then you start building boundaries. Real ones, not just suggestions. They're still my family, I said weakly. Are they? Hannah challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, they haven't acted like family in a very long time. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Elaine's words. Only for family. The more I thought about it, the more a cold realization settled over me. To them, I wasn't family. I was a resource. An ATM with a heartbeat. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider a terrifying question. What if I stopped giving? For 7 days, I tracked their Hawaiian adventure through social media like a digital stalker. Each photo was a new wound. Elaine in a designer bikini by their infinity pool. Jason with a Mai Tai on a sunset cruise. My parents posing with leis at a luau. All paid for by me. All enjoyed without me. They looked happy, carefree, as if my absence was a relief rather than a loss. On the 8th day, I stopped looking. Instead, I called my bank. I'd like to report fraudulent charges, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Certainly, Ms. Brooks. Can you identify the transactions in question? The representative asked. I hesitated. Were they really fraudulent? I had authorized the initial payments, but the vacation was purchased under false pretenses, with the explicit understanding that I would be participating. In the end, I couldn't do it. I'm sorry, never mind. I made a mistake. After hanging up, I sat at my, kitchen counter, staring at the statement. $22,342.67. Almost half a year's worth of mortgage payments on a house I couldn't afford to buy because I was too busy financing everyone else's lives. My phone rang. Hannah. I've been thinking, she said without preamble. You need to talk to a lawyer. About what? About the money, Nat. All of it. Not just Hawaii. You've been keeping records, right? I had. Meticulously. Every transfer, every check, every cash withdrawal, all documented in a spreadsheet I'd labeled family support. The running total made me nauseous every time I looked at it. I have records, I confirmed. But they're family. I can't sue my family. I'm not saying sue them, I'm saying protect yourself. Because if they're capable of this, who knows what else they might do. The thought had never occurred to me. What else could they do? Hannah connected me with Michael Lawson, a calm, sharp-eyed attorney who specialized in financial disputes. His office was minimalist. Clean lines, muted colors, nothing extravagant. It immediately put me at ease. Ms. Brooks? He greeted me, shaking my hand firmly. Hannah briefed me on your situation. I'd like to hear it from you if you don't mind. I told him everything. The years of financial support, the promises of repayment that never materialized, the Hawaii betrayal. As I spoke, he took notes, occasionally asking for clarification, but never judgment. When I finished, he set down his pen and folded his hands on the desk. What you've described isn't just morally questionable, it potentially crosses into legal territory. The vacation, specifically, could constitute fraud since you paid under the explicit expectation of participation. I don't want to press charges, I said quickly. I understand, but we should still take precautionary measures. First, I suggest freezing any automatic payments you've set up for their benefit. Second, we should draft formal letters requesting repayment of the larger loans, establishing a paper trail. Third, let's update your will and financial directives. My will? I asked, confused. Why? His expression was grave. Because people who have shown this level of financial entitlement often escalate when the resource disappears. I've seen cases where family members attempt to claim that the person withholding funds is mentally incompetent or being manipulated. Chill ran through me. They wouldn't do that. I hope not, he said kindly. But my job is to prepare for worst-case scenarios. That night, I did as Michael advised. I logged into my accounts and canceled every automatic payment. Elaine's monthly acting class stipend, Jason's car insurance, my parents' utility bill assistance. Each cancellation felt like cutting a string that had tethered me to obligations I never should have assumed. For 3 days, nothing happened. They were still in Hawaii, probably oblivious to the changes I was implementing back home. Then they returned, and reality crashed down. Elaine called first, her voice hoarse from what I imagined was a week of tropical cocktails. Nat, we're back. Hawaii was absolutely amazing. You would have loved it. The casual cruelty of her statement left me speechless. Anyway, she continued, filling my silence, I just checked my account and noticed the deposit didn't go through this month. There must be some mistake with the bank. I cleared my throat. It's not a mistake, Elaine. I've canceled all the payments. What? Why? I think you know why. A beat of silence. Is this about the trip? Because if you're upset. Upset? I interrupted, my voice rising. You told me I wasn't family, Elaine. You took a vacation I paid for and deliberately excluded me. So yes, I'm a little upset. You're overreacting, she said, her tone shifting to the condescending one she often used when she wanted to make me doubt myself. It was just one trip. After everything you've done for us, do you really want to ruin our relationship over one misunderstanding? It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. Your choice. And now I'm making mine. So what? You're cutting us off completely? Over one little incident? I stopped myself, taking a deep breath. This isn't just about Hawaii, Elaine. This is about years of taking without giving back. Years of treating me like an ATM instead of a sister. That's not fair, she protested. We've been going through tough times. You know that. You've always been the stable one, the successful one. And you've always been happy to benefit from that stability without ever contributing to it, I replied, surprised by my own firmness. Not anymore. What am I supposed to do about my rent? Her voice had taken on a panicked edge. It's due next week. You could try paying it yourself. That's what adults do. She gasped. You're being cruel. No, Elaine. For the first time, I'm being honest. After I hung up, my hands were shaking. I'd never spoken to my sister that way before. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Jason called next, his approach more tactical. Hey, Nat, he said, his voice casual. How's it going? Cut to, the chase, Jason. I know Elaine called you. He sighed. Look, I get that you're mad about the trip. That wasn't cool. And for what it's worth, I told Elaine it was a bad idea. But you went anyway. Yeah, he admitted. I did. And I'm sorry. His apology, the first I'd heard from any of them, caught me off guard. For a moment, I wavered. The thing is, he continued, I'm kind of in a tight spot with this rent situation. Could you maybe just help out one more time? Then we can figure out a more permanent solution. And there it was, the real reason for his call. No, Jason, I can't do that anymore. Come on, Nat, just until I get back on my feet. I've got a solid lead on a new job. You've been saying that for years, I pointed out. Nothing changes. This time it's different, he insisted. It always is, until it isn't. After Jason came my parents. A united front of guilt and manipulation. We raised you better than this, my mother said, disappointment dripping from every word. Family supports family. I agree, I replied. So where was your support when I went through my divorce? Or when I was working 60-hour weeks to afford helping all of you? Support goes both ways, Mom. We've always been there for you emotionally, my father chimed in. I almost laughed. Have you? Because I don't remember either of you calling to check on me unless you needed something. The calls continued for days, escalating in desperation as bills came due and accounts went unpaid. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial anger, attempted guilt-tripping, hollow, promises, and finally desperate pleading. Through it all, I held firm, repeating variations of the same message. I'm not responsible for your finances anymore. Then the tone changed. The requests became demands. The guilt trips became threats. You'll regret this, Elaine hissed during our last conversation. You think you can just cut us off and everything will be fine? We're your family, Nat. We know everything about you. What is that supposed to mean? I asked. It means we can make things very difficult for you if we want to. Her words sent a chill through me that lingered long after I'd hung up. The next day, I received an email from my company's HR department requesting a meeting. When I arrived, the director looked uncomfortable. We've received some concerning information about your personal situation, she began carefully. Someone claiming to be your sister called expressing worry about your mental health. She suggested you might be making erratic financial decisions due to extreme stress. My blood ran cold. That's absolutely false. We thought it might be, she assured me quickly. Your work has been exemplary, but we had to follow up given the nature of the allegations. I left the meeting shaken but vindicated. My work spoke for itself. Still, Elaine's tactics were escalating in exactly the way Michael had warned they might. I called him immediately. They're trying to interfere with my job, I explained. My sister implied they'd make things difficult for me, and now this. Document everything, he instructed. Every call, every text, every interaction with third parties about these allegations. We may need to consider a cease and desist letter. That evening, I sat in my quiet apartment, utterly drained. My phone lit up with a text from Hannah. Dinner tonight. My place. No excuses. I'm making lasagna. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself smile. On my way, I texted back. As I drove to Hannah's, I realized something important. I wasn't alone. I had people in my corner, real family, chosen family, who supported me without conditions or expectations. And that was worth more than all the false family loyalty money could buy. 3 weeks after I cut financial ties with my family, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. The return address was from Bergman Phillips and Associates, attorneys at law. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a formal notice informing me that my family was seeking a financial conservatorship hearing, claiming I was mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. They cited my erratic behavior, paranoid accusations, and sudden withdrawal from family relationships as evidence of my allegedly deteriorating mental state. I called Michael immediately. They're trying to take control of my money, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How is this even possible? It's not uncommon, unfortunately, Michael replied, his voice steady. When financial exploitation is interrupted, this is often the next move. They're hoping to scare you into resuming payments. Can they actually do this? Get control of my finances? Not with the evidence we have, he assured me. But, we need to take this seriously. They're escalating, which means they're desperate. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. During that time, I existed in a strange limbo of anxiety and determination. I continued going to work, kept up with my normal routines, but always with the knowledge that my own family was actively trying to paint me as mentally incompetent. Michael helped me gather evidence, my immaculate work performance reviews, statements from colleagues attesting to my stability and competence, documentation of the financial transfers I'd made to my family over the years, and text messages showing their escalating demands and threats when I stopped paying. Hannah insisted on testifying as a character witness. "I've known you for over a decade," she said firmly. "No one is better qualified to speak about your mental state than me." The day of the hearing arrived with an unseasonable chill. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, pulled my hair back into a neat bun, and applied minimal makeup. I needed to look exactly what I was, a responsible, stable professional. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing halls. Michael met me at the entrance, his briefcase in hand, his expression confident. "Remember," he said quietly as we walked, "they're counting on emotion to make you look unstable. No matter what they say, stay calm." We entered the courtroom, and there they were, my family, seated together on the opposite side. My mother in her church clothes, my father looking uncomfortable in a tie, Jason shifting nervously, avoiding my gaze, and Elaine, dressed dramatically in black as if attending a funeral, her expression a perfect mask of concern. Their lawyer, a silver-haired man with an expensive watch, approached as proceedings were about to begin. "Ms. Brooks," he said smoothly, "there's still time to resolve this privately. Your family is willing to drop the petition if you'll agree to resume financial support and cover their legal fees." Michael stepped between us. "My client will not be intimidated. If you want to discuss settlement, you can direct your communications through me." The hearing began with their side presenting first. Their lawyer painted a picture of me that I barely recognized. A woman spiraling into paranoia, cutting off loving family members out of delusion and spite, making irrational financial decisions. Elaine took the stand, tears glistening perfectly in her eyes. "We're so worried about her," she said, her voice catching. "She's always been the stable one, our rock. Then suddenly, after her divorce, she started becoming possessive about money, accusing us of using her. She planned this elaborate vacation and then backed out at the last minute, blaming us for going without her when she was the one who changed her mind." I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Michael placed a steadying hand on my arm. Jason testified next, less dramatically, but with practiced sincerity. "Natalie has always been generous. That's why this sudden change is so alarming. She's not herself. We're afraid she might be giving money to other people, maybe being taken advantage of by someone. We just want to protect her." My parents echoed similar concerns, speaking of their worry and heartbreak over my supposed decline. When it was our turn, Michael was methodical. He started by presenting my financial records, showing the systematic pattern of one-way financial support. "Your Honor," he said, "these records demonstrate that over the past 3 years, Ms. Brooks has transferred approximately $70,000 to her family members. Not a single dollar has been repaid. This isn't about mental instability. It's about a woman finally setting reasonable boundaries with family members who have come to treat her as their personal bank." He called my supervisor from work, who testified about my consistent performance and recent promotion. Then came 2 colleagues who spoke about my reliability and sound judgment. Hannah's testimony was particularly powerful. "I've known Natalie since college," she stated firmly. "She is the most level-headed person I know. What's happened here is simple. Her family became accustomed to financial support that she could no longer sustain. When she set boundaries, they responded with this malicious attempt to seize control of her assets." Finally, it was my turn. As I took the stand, I looked directly at my family for the first time since entering the courtroom. Their expressions ranged from Elaine's practiced concern to my father's growing discomfort. "Ms. Brooks," Michael began, "could you explain in your own words the financial relationship you've had with your family over the past few years?" I took a deep breath. After my divorce, I threw myself into helping my family financially. At first, it was for specific emergencies, a car repair, an overdue bill. But gradually, it became expected. Regular transfers, automatic payments for their expenses. I convinced myself it was temporary, that they were just going through rough patches. And the Hawaii trip? I planned it as a way for us to reconnect emotionally instead of just financially. I paid for everything, over $22,000 for a luxury vacation for 5. But when we arrived at the airport, they told me I wasn't welcome. My sister's exact words were, "This trip is only for family." A murmur ran through the courtroom. After that, I realized how unhealthy our relationship had become. I stopped the automatic payments and asked for some of the larger amounts to be repaid. That's when the threats began. During cross-examination, their lawyer tried to provoke an emotional response, suggesting I was vindictive, that I'd promised financial support and then cruelly withdrawn it. I remained calm, answering each question directly. I never promised lifelong financial support. I helped in what I thought were temporary emergencies, but which became a pattern of dependence. When I established boundaries, they responded not with understanding, but with this attempt to declare me incompetent. By the time the judge called a recess to consider her decision, I felt oddly peaceful. Whatever happened, I had spoken my truth. When court reconvened an hour later, the judge looked directly at my family as she delivered her ruling. The petition for conservatorship is denied, she stated firmly. I find no evidence whatsoever of mental instability or financial irresponsibility on the part of Natalie Brooks. On the contrary, the evidence suggests she has been systematically exploited by the very people now seeking to control her assets. She turned to me. Ms. Brooks, you have the court's sympathy for the position in which you've been placed. I would strongly encourage you to consider a restraining order if the harassment continues. Relief flooded through me so intensely that I had to grip the table to stay upright. Across the room, my family sat in stunned silence. Elaine's perfect facade cracked into a look of naked rage before she quickly composed herself. As we left the courthouse, Michael at my side, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of obligation, of guilt, of manipulation, it was lifting step by step. What happens now? I asked as we reached the parking lot. Now, Michael said with a small smile. You live your life on your own terms. Behind us, I heard my name being called. Jason was jogging toward us, alone. Natalie, wait, he called. Can we talk, please? Michael looked at me questioningly. I nodded, and he stepped a discreet distance away. Jason stopped a few feet from me, hands shoved in his pockets. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for everything. This went too far. Yes, it did, I agreed, not making it easier for him. I let Elaine take the lead like always. I should have stood up to her, to all of them. He looked genuinely remorseful. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I know what we did was wrong. I studied my brother's face, seeing glimpses of the boy he'd once been, before adult disappointments, before he'd learned to take the path of least resistance. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It matters that you did. He nodded, blinking rapidly. I'm going to try to make things right. Maybe not now, but someday. I hope you do, Jason. Not for me, but for yourself. As he walked away, shoulders hunched against the wind, I felt no triumph, only a quiet sadness for what had been lost, and a glimmer of hope for what might still be saved in time. The weeks following the court hearing felt like learning to breathe again. Without the constant drain of my family's financial needs, I discovered something unexpected. Freedom. Not just financial. Freedom, but emotional space to rediscover who I was without the weight of their expectations. My first act of independence was practical. Meeting with a financial advisor. Sandra Chen, a straight-talking woman with a geometric haircut and sharp eyes, reviewed my finances with professional detachment. You're in better shape than I expected, she said, looking up from my statements. Despite the significant outflows to your family, you've maintained reasonable retirement contributions and minimal debt. That speaks to your fundamental financial discipline. So what now? I asked. What do I do with the money I'm no longer giving away? Sandra smiled. That's the fun part. First, we build a robust emergency fund, 6 months of expenses. Then we can discuss your actual goals. What do you want, Natalie? Not for your family? For yourself. The question caught me off guard. What did I want? I'd spent so long meeting others' needs that my own desires had become background noise, easily ignored. I'm not sure, I admitted. That's okay, Sandra assured me. Start small. Is there something you've always wanted to do but put off because of money or obligations? I thought for a moment. I've always wanted to visit Italy. My grandmother was from Florence, but I've never been. Perfect. Let's put that on the list. What else? By the end of our meeting, we had created not just a financial plan, but something that felt remarkably like a roadmap for my future. Emergency fund, Italy trip, down payment for a small house with a garden, perhaps even starting my own financial. Consulting business someday. These are all achievable, Sandra said as I prepared to leave, especially now that you're keeping your own resources for your own life. That evening, I stood on my apartment balcony watching the sunset over Delaware Park. For the first time in years, I felt hope. Not the desperate kind that things would somehow magically improve, but the solid, grounded hope that comes from having a plan and the means to execute it. My phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "Dinner tomorrow? Bringing someone I want you to meet." The someone turned out to be Ben Sharma, Hannah's colleague from the university where she taught literature. He was tall and lean, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and a quiet confidence that put me instantly at ease. Over dinner, I learned he taught comparative literature, specialized in Italian Renaissance poetry, and made what Hannah declared was the best risotto outside of Milan. "Hannah tells me you're planning a trip to Italy," he said as we lingered over coffee. "Florence is magical. You'll love it." "You've been?" I asked. "Many times. I lead a student trip every other summer. In fact, I'm going again next June." He hesitated, then added, "If you'd like some recommendations, I'd be happy to help with planning." Under normal circumstances, I might have deflected, kept things polite but distant, but these weren't normal circumstances. These were new, uncharted waters where I was allowing myself to want things, to pursue them without guilt. "I'd like that," I said, meeting his gaze. "Very much." Over the following weeks, my life began to take new shape. I started Italian lessons at the community center, discovering a natural affinity for the language. I joined a weekend hiking group, rediscovering the simple pleasure of movement and fresh air. I even enrolled in a container gardening class, bringing home herbs and cherry tomatoes that transformed my small balcony into a fragrant oasis. Ben and I met for coffee to discuss Italian travel tips, which led to dinner to continue the conversation, which led to weekend walks in the park that had nothing to do with Italy at all. He was easy to talk to, interested without being intrusive, and refreshingly straightforward. "Hannah told me about your family situation," he admitted during one of our walks. "Not in detail, but enough to know you've been through something difficult." I tensed slightly. "Does that make me a charity case?" "Not at all," he said seriously. "It makes you someone who faced a tough choice and chose self-respect. That's admirable." My family's attempts at contact gradually shifted in tone. My parents sent stilted birthday cards with no mention of money or the court case. Jason occasionally texted about neutral topics: the Bills' latest game, a new restaurant downtown. Only Elaine maintained radio silence, her pride apparently too wounded to acknowledge my continued existence. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness for what we'd lost, or perhaps for what we'd never truly had. But those moments grew less frequent as my new life took shape around me. 4 months after the court hearing, I received an unexpected email from my father. Unlike his usual terse messages, this one was several paragraphs long. "Natalie, I've been trying to find the right words for months now. There probably aren't any right words after what happened, but I need to try anyway. What we did to you was wrong. Not just the Hawaii trip, though that was particularly cruel. All of it. The years of taking your help without appreciation, the expectations that you would keep giving without end, the attempt to control your finances when you finally said, 'Enough.' It was all wrong, and I was wrong to go along with it. Your mother and I have been doing some hard thinking. We enabled Elaine's worst tendencies and allowed her to drag Jason along. We prioritized the squeaky wheels in the family while taking for granted the one person who was actually responsible and caring. I'm deeply ashamed of that now. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the harm we caused. Your mother isn't ready to have this conversation yet, but I hope someday she will be. You deserved better from us. I'm sorry we failed you. Dad." I read the email 3 times, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't a magical fix. Nothing could undo what had happened, but it was acknowledgement, and that was more than I'd expected to receive. After careful consideration, I replied with a simple message. "Thank you for saying this, Dad. It means a lot to hear it. I'm doing well and building a good life. I hope you are finding your way too. Natalie." 6 months after cutting financial ties with my family, I stood in my apartment surrounded by boxes. I was moving. Not far, just to a small townhouse near the park with a real garden and enough space for the growing collection of books Ben kept lending me with the unspoken understanding they weren't going back to his shelves. Hannah arrived to help, surveying the chaos with hands on hips. "Look at you, homeowner, very adult." I laughed. Sometimes I can't believe it myself. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine affording a place like this. "Amazing what you can do when you're not bankrolling 4 adults," Hannah observed dryly. She picked up a framed photo. Me on a recent weekend trip to Niagara Falls, smiling broadly with the falls thundering behind me. "You look happy here. Really happy." "I am," I said, realizing the truth of it. "Not every day, not perfectly, but genuinely." "Ben's good for you," she said casually, but with obvious satisfaction at her matchmaking success. I smiled. "He is. But that's not why I'm happy. I mean, he's part of it, but you built this." Hannah finished for me. "This is your life, on your terms." Exactly. As we carried boxes to the moving truck, I thought about the journey of the past months. The pain hadn't disappeared. Some wounds leave permanent marks. But I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed and built connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Bringing lunch for the moving crew. Any requests?" I smiled as I texted back, "Surprise us. We trust you." And I realized that was the most profound change of all. Learning to trust again, not blindly, but with clear eyes and an open heart. Learning to trust myself, my judgment, and the genuine connections I was building. Later that evening, after Hannah and Ben had gone and I was alone in my new home, I unpacked a small box labeled "Important." Inside was a journal I'd started after the court hearing, documenting my journey of recovery. I opened to a blank page and wrote, "Today I moved into my own home, something that once seemed impossible. I'm building a life that reflects my values, not my fears. I'm learning that family can be chosen, and that boundaries aren't walls but foundations for healthy relationships. I don't know if my birth family and I will ever truly reconcile, maybe with some of them, in time. But I do know that I no longer need their approval or acceptance to feel complete. The truth is, I am enough, just as I am. And that knowledge is worth more than all the money I ever gave away seeking love that couldn't be bought." I closed the journal and placed it on my new bedside table. Through the window, I could see stars appearing in the darkening sky. Countless possibilities, each one shining with its own light. Tomorrow, I would plant herbs in my new garden. Next month, I would finalize plans for my Italy trip. And in all the days between, I would continue building this new life, brick by brick, choice by choice. Not perfect, but mine. And that was enough. 1 year after the airport betrayal, I found myself at Fiumicino Airport in Rome, wheeling my suitcase through the arrivals hall. The air conditioning was a blessed relief from the June heat that had greeted me as I disembarked. "Natalie!" a familiar voice called. I turned to see Ben waving, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him in Buffalo. The Italian sun had already darkened his skin, and he wore a loose linen shirt that made him look like a local. "You didn't have to meet me," I said as he enveloped me in a hug. "I know you're busy with the student group. They're all at the hotel with my teaching assistant," he replied, taking my suitcase. "Besides, I wouldn't miss seeing your face when you first step onto Italian soil." We emerged into the Roman sunshine, and I took a deep breath of air fragrant with exhaust fumes, cigarette smoke, and something indefinably Mediterranean. "So?" Ben asked, watching me closely. "Was it worth the wait?" Smiled. "Absolutely." The next 2 weeks were a revelation. While Ben taught his students in the mornings, I explored Rome at my own pace, getting lost in narrow cobblestone streets, discovering tiny cafes where the espresso was stronger than any coffee I'd ever tasted, sitting on sun-warmed steps to sketch ancient ruins with the art supplies I'd packed on impulse. In the afternoons, we would sometimes meet, Ben showing me hidden corners of the city that guidebooks overlooked. In the evenings, we joined his students for dinner, where I found myself engaged in passionate discussions about literature, art, and history, with these bright young minds who accepted me immediately as part of their temporary community. "You're good with them," Ben observed one evening as we walked back to our hotel, the students having gone ahead. "They make it easy," I replied. "They're so curious, so open to experience." "That's how you are now," he said. "Not everyone who goes through what you did comes out with such openness." I considered his words. I think losing what I thought was my family forced me to look at the world differently, to see possibilities rather than obligations. Ben took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Speaking of possibilities, how would you feel about extending your trip? After the student program ends, I usually stay an extra week in Florence. You could join me." The old Natalie would have hesitated, calculated, worried about work and responsibilities. The new Natalie simply smiled and said, "I'd love to." Florence was everything I'd imagined from my grandmother's stories and more. The Arno River gleaming in the morning light, the Duomo dominating the skyline, the Uffizi Gallery with its treasures that moved me to unexpected tears. I sent a postcard to my father, the only family member whose address I still had, with a simple message. Grandmother was right about Florence. It feels like coming home. On our last evening, Ben and I sat at a tiny restaurant tucked away from the tourist areas, a bottle of Chianti between us and the day's last light gilding the ancient buildings. "I have something for you," Ben said, pulling a small package from his pocket. Inside was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a key, intricately worked with tiny flowering vines. "It's beautiful," I said, lifting it from the box. "It reminded me of you," Ben said. "Not just because of your Italian heritage, but because of what keys represent. They open doors, but they also secure what's valuable. You've done both this year. Opened new doors for yourself while protecting what matters." As he fastened the necklace around my neck, I felt a sense of completion, of having traveled a great circle and returned to myself, but changed. "I've been thinking," I said, touching the pendant. "When we get back to Buffalo, I want to start my own business. Financial counseling for women in transition, divorce, career change, family situations. I think I have something to offer them." Ben's face lit up. "That's perfect for you, and the timing is right with your promotion at the firm. I'd start small, just a few clients on evenings and weekends, but eventually it could be full-time," he finished. "I think you'd be amazing at it." The confidence in his voice matched the growing certainty in my own heart. This wasn't just a dream. It was a viable path forward, built on both my professional expertise and my personal experience. When we returned to Buffalo, summer was in full bloom. My garden welcomed me with an explosion of herbs and flowers that had thrived under my neighbor's care. My townhouse, once just a symbol of independence, now felt truly like home. I wasted no time in putting my plan into action. I created a website, printed business cards, and began networking with divorce attorneys and women's support groups. My first client was a recent widow struggling to understand the investments her husband had managed. My second was a young professional trying to build financial independence while caring for an aging parent. With each client, I shared not just financial knowledge, but the hard-won wisdom of my own journey, the importance of boundaries, the danger of financial codependency, the power of saying no when necessary. I never shared the specifics of my family situation, but the authenticity of my understanding resonated with these women in ways that technical expertise alone never could. 6 months into my side business, I had a waiting list and was considering reducing my hours at the firm. Ben had moved into the townhouse, his books now properly shelved alongside mine instead of scattered in perpetual loans. We were discussing a return to Italy the following summer, this time to the coastal villages of Cinque Terre. Then came the email that stopped me in my tracks. Subject: long overdue apology. From Elaine Brooks. I stared at the notification on my phone, pulse quickening. Of all my family members, Elaine had been the most conspicuously silent since the court hearing. No birthday cards, no tentative text messages, nothing. With trembling fingers, I opened the email. "Natalie, I've written this email 100 times in my head over the past year and deleted it every time. Pride, shame, anger, they all got in the way. But I'm finally sending it because I owe you this much, at least. I was cruel to you. Not just at the airport, but for years before that. I treated you like an ATM instead of a sister. And when you finally stood up for yourself, I tried to punish you for it. There's no excuse for what I did. I could blame it on my own insecurities, on jealousy of your success, on the dysfunctional patterns our parents established. But the truth is simpler. I behaved selfishly because I thought I could get away with it. Because you always forgave, always helped, always put everyone else first. The court hearing was my rock bottom. Watching you stand there dignified and honest while I spun lies about your mental state, I've never felt more ashamed. Afterward, I couldn't face you or myself. I've been in therapy for the past 8 months, trying to understand why I became someone who could do such things to her own sister. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply. But I wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I am working to become someone different, someone better. With sincere regret, Elaine and I sat heavily on the couch, reading and rereading the message. It contained none of the manipulative language I'd come to expect from Elaine. No subtle guilt trips, no veiled requests, no self-pity disguised as apology. It seemed genuine. Ben found me still sitting there 20 minutes later when he returned from his evening run. "Nat, everything okay?" he asked, concern etching his features as he took in my expression. Wordlessly, I handed him my phone. He read the email, then looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked, not offering his opinion until he'd heard mine. I think she might actually mean it," I said slowly. "It doesn't sound like the Elaine I know. Maybe she's not the Elaine you knew anymore," Ben suggested gently. "People can change when they're forced to face consequences." "Should I respond?" Ben sat beside me, taking my hand. "That depends on what you want, not what you feel obligated to do. This is about your healing, not hers. What would serve your well-being?" I considered his question carefully. A year ago, I might have rushed to reply, eager to mend bridges at any cost. Now I understood that forgiveness and reconciliation were separate processes, and neither should be entered into lightly. "I think I need time," I said finally, "to sit with this, to figure out what it means to me." "Then take time," Ben said simply. "There's no deadline on healing." I saved the email but didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took it to my next therapy session, where Dr. Karen and I discussed what healthy boundaries might look like if I chose to open a door to any kind of relationship with Elaine again. "Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it never happened," Dr. Karen reminded me, "and it doesn't mean returning to old patterns. It can simply mean releasing the grip that anger has on your own heart, for your sake rather than theirs." A week later, I replied to Elaine, "Thank you for your email. It took courage to write, and I appreciate the apology. I've needed time to consider how to respond. This past year has been transformative for me. I've built a life I'm proud of, with relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I've learned that true family, whether blood or chosen, uplifts rather than depletes. I'm not ready for a meeting or regular contact yet. That may come in time, but healing can't be rushed. For now, I can offer this. I accept your apology, and I hope your journey toward becoming someone different is fulfilling. Natalie." Her response came the same day, brief, without demands. "Thank you for responding. I understand and respect your boundaries. The door is open whenever and if ever you decide to walk through it." For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a weight lifting, not because family harmony had been magically restored, but because I had engaged with the situation on my own terms, from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. That weekend, my small business was featured in a local magazine article about women entrepreneurs. The photo showed me in my office, the Italian key pendant visible at my throat, my expression confident and serene. The article mentioned my background in corporate finance but not my family history. That remained private, transformed into the empathy that informed my work, but no longer defining my identity or limiting my future. As autumn painted buffalo in russet and gold, I celebrated the quiet victory of having navigated a full cycle of seasons on my own terms. Winter, spring, summer, and now fall again, each bringing its own challenges and gifts, each finding me stronger, more centered, more authentic than before. "What are you thinking about?" Ben asked one evening as we walked through the park, leaves crunching beneath our feet. I smiled, watching the setting sun gild the treetops. "About journeys. How sometimes you have to lose your way completely before you can find your true path." He squeezed my hand, understanding without needing further explanation, and we walked on together, into the gathering dusk and whatever lay beyond. 18 months after the Hawaii betrayal, I found myself driving down the familiar street where I grew up. The modest two-story colonial looked smaller than I remembered, its blue paint faded, the maple tree in the front yard now towering where it had once been a sapling. I parked across the street, hands tight on the steering wheel, heart pounding. This wasn't a planned visit. I hadn't spoken to my mother since the court hearing, our only contact being the occasional stiff email exchange or formal holiday card. But the call that morning had changed everything. "Natalie," my father's voice had been tight, with strain. "Your mother's in the hospital, heart attack. It's serious. I thought you should know." Now I sat outside my childhood home, summoning the courage to cross the street. I wasn't here out of obligation or guilt. I was here because despite everything, these flawed people were part of my story, and I had worked too hard on my own healing to let fear keep me prisoner. The front door opened before I reached it. Jason stood there, looking older somehow, his usual easy smile replaced by worried eyes and tense shoulders. "Nat," he said simply, stepping aside to let me in. "Thank you for coming." The house smelled the same. My mother's lavender potpourri, the faint mustiness of old carpet, the lingering aroma of coffee. But things looked different. Shabbier, more worn. Without, my financial support, my parents had clearly been living more modestly. My father emerged from the kitchen, a mug clutched in his hands like a lifeline. His eyes widened at the sight of me. "You came," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "How is she?" I asked, setting down my purse. "Stable," he replied. "They put in 2 stents. If all goes well, she might come home in a few days." He hesitated. "She doesn't know I called you." I nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "I'd like to see her anyway, if that's okay." "Of course," my father said quickly. "I'm heading back to the hospital now. Jason was just dropping off some things we needed." Jason cleared his throat. "Actually, I'd like to go too, if that's all right. We could all go together?" The awkward formality between us was new territory. Once, we would have moved together automatically as a unit. Now we were like cautious diplomats, each careful not to overstep. "That works," I said. On the drive to Buffalo General, I sat in the back of my father's sedan, watching the familiar streets pass by. So much had changed since I'd last been in a car with my family. My business had grown to the point where I'd reduced my corporate hours to part-time. Ben and I had gotten engaged during a weekend trip to the Finger Lakes, a simple proposal that reflected our uncomplicated love. I had made peace with parts of my past, though others remained tender to the touch. At the hospital, we rode the elevator in silence. Outside my mother's room, my father paused. "She might be sleeping," he warned. "And the doctor said not to upset her." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here to rehash old wounds, Dad." He nodded, properly chastised, and pushed open the door. My mother looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors creating a technological cocoon around her. Her once dark hair was now entirely gray, cut shorter than she'd worn it when I was growing up. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady. As if sensing our presence, she opened her eyes slowly. She blinked at my father and Jason, then her gaze landed on me. Surprise, confusion, and something unreadable flickered across her face. "Natalie?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Hi, Mom." I moved to the side of her bed, not reaching for her hand but standing close enough that I could if either of us made the choice. "Dad called. I wanted to check on you." She stared at me for a long moment. "You didn't have to come." Once, I would have taken that as rejection, as confirmation that I wasn't wanted. Now, with the perspective time and therapy had given me, I heard the uncertainty beneath her words, the question she couldn't quite ask. "Why would you come after everything?" "I know," I said simply. "I wanted to." She nodded. Slightly, eyes filling with tears she seemed determined not to shed. "The doctor says I have to make changes. Diet, exercise, stress." A pause. Apparently, holding on to resentment is bad for the heart. It was as close to an acknowledgement of our fractured relationship as she had ever offered. "I've heard that too," I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. We didn't dive into the past that day. There were no dramatic apologies or tearful reconciliations. Instead, we talked about her treatment plan, about the unseasonably warm spring, about neutral topics that allowed us to re-establish the most tentative of connections. As visiting hours ended, I prepared to leave. My mother reached out suddenly, her hand cool and fragile as it grasped mine. "You look good, Natalie," she said. "Happy." "I am," I confirmed, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I am happy." Outside the hospital, Jason walked me to my car while our father went to bring his car around. "She's been different," Jason said abruptly. "Since everything that happened, more withdrawn, but also, I don't know, more reflective maybe. People change when they're forced to face reality," I observed, unlocking my car. Jason nodded, shuffling his feet. "I've changed too. Got a steady job finally. Insurance adjusting. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills. My own bills," he added, meeting my eyes for the first time. "I haven't taken money from them in over a year." "That's good, Jason. I'm glad." "I've wanted to call you," he admitted, "to really apologize. Not just the half-assed attempt I made after the court thing. But I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me." "I wasn't sure either," I said honestly. "It took time to sort through everything. And now?" I considered his question carefully. "Now, I think I'd be open to a coffee sometime, to see where things stand." The relief on his face was palpable. "I'd like that, very much." As I drove home, I felt a curious lightness. Not because all was forgiven or forgotten. It wasn't, and perhaps never fully would be. But because I had faced a situation that once would have sent me spiraling into anxiety and people-pleasing, and I had maintained my boundaries while still opening the door to potential healing. When I arrived home, Ben was grading papers at the kitchen table, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as I entered, immediately setting his work aside. "How was it?" he asked simply. I sank into the chair beside him. "Complicated, strange, but better than I expected." He nodded, not pushing for details I wasn't ready to share. Instead, he took my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "I'm proud of you," he said. "It takes courage to walk back into painful places on your own terms." Later that night, I added a new entry to the journal I'd been keeping. "Today I visited my mother in the hospital. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. The past hasn't disappeared, but it no longer controls my present. I am the author of my own story now, deciding which characters remain in it and which chapters are worth revisiting. The most surprising discovery isn't that I could face my family. Again, it's that I could do so without losing myself in the process. The boundaries I've built aren't walls meant to punish. They're the foundation that allows me to engage with difficult relationships from a place of strength rather than vulnerability. Perhaps that's the truest form of forgiveness. Not pretending the hurt never happened, but preventing it from determining where your story goes. Next. Over the next few months, my mother's recovery provided a structured reason for limited contact with my family. I visited once a week, usually bringing flowers or magazines, but never money or offers of financial support. Our conversations remained on neutral ground, the past a territory we silently agreed not to enter yet. Elaine remained conspicuously absent from these visits, though my father mentioned she called regularly. I didn't ask about her, and no one volunteered information. Then, 2 weeks before my wedding, I received another email from her. "Natalie, I hear you're getting married soon. Congratulations. Dad says your fiancé is a good man who makes you happy. You deserve that. I understand why I haven't been included in the family visits or in your wedding plans. Some bridges once burned can't be easily rebuilt. I just wanted you to know that I'm continuing my work in therapy and have made some positive changes. I'm back in school, studying social work of all things. Turns out experiencing the consequences of selfish behavior firsthand makes you think differently about human relationships. I wish you all the happiness in the world on your wedding day and beyond. I truly mean that. Elaine." I showed the email to Ben that evening. "What do you think?" he asked after reading it. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me is still wary, but another part wonders if people really can change that fundamentally. "People can change," Ben said thoughtfully. "The question is whether that changes what you need from the relationship." I nodded, considering his words. "I don't think I want her at the wedding. That feels like too much, too soon. But maybe I could meet her for coffee sometime. Neutral territory, just to see." Ben smiled. "That sounds like a wise next step, if it's what you want." I composed my reply carefully. "Elaine, thank you for your email and the good wishes. Ben is indeed a wonderful man, and we're looking forward to our small ceremony. I'm glad to hear you're pursuing social work. That seems like a meaningful path. I'm not ready for a big reconnection, but if you'd like, we could meet for coffee sometime after the honeymoon. No pressure, no expectations, just a conversation to see where things stand. Take care, Natalie." Her response came quickly. "I would like that very much. Just let me know when." My wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with just enough autumn crispness in the air to make the golden sunlight feel magical. We'd chosen a small venue, a renovated historic boathouse overlooking the lake, and limited our guest list to 60 people who truly mattered in our lives. Hannah was my maid of honor, resplendent in deep emerald that complemented her auburn hair. A few trusted colleagues, my new friends from the hiking group, Ben's family who had welcomed me with open arms. They filled the rows of white chairs facing the water. In the last row, sitting quietly together, were my father, mother, and Jason. Their presence was both strange and right, acknowledgement of our shared past without letting it overshadow my future. As my father walked me down the aisle, his hand trembling slightly. Where it rested on mine, he whispered, "I'm sorry we almost missed this. Thank you for giving us another chance." I squeezed his hand in response. Words unnecessary. Ben waited at the end of the aisle, his face lighting up as our eyes met. And in that moment, I understood something profound. The journey that had begun with betrayal had led me exactly where I needed to be. Not despite the pain, but because of how it had transformed me. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, simple promises of respect, honesty, and mutual support. When Ben slipped the wedding band beside my engagement ring, I caught sight of the Italian key pendant I still wore around my neck, a symbol of all the doors I had opened for myself along the way. At the reception, Jason approached with his new girlfriend, a pediatric nurse with a warm smile and firm handshake. My mother hugged me briefly, awkwardly, but with genuine feeling. My father danced with me, both of us a little stiff but trying. None of it was perfect. The wounds of the past hadn't magically disappeared, but something new was growing in their place. Not blind trust, but measured hope. Not obligation, but possibility. Later, as Ben and I swayed together for our last dance, I rested my head on his shoulder. "Happy?" he murmured into my hair. "Beyond words," I replied. "Not just because of today, but because of everything that led to it, even the hard parts." He pulled back slightly to look into my eyes. "Especially the hard parts," he corrected gently. "They're what made you into the woman I fall in love with more every day." As the music faded, I looked around at the room full of people who loved us, some from the beginning, some found along the way, some reconnecting after painful separation. Each relationship unique, each one now defined by genuine choice rather than obligation or habit. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that I had found my way home. 5 years after the Hawaii incident, I stood at the podium in a Bashiu, sunlit conference room, facing an audience of women ranging from their 20s to their 60s. My book, Only for Family, Finding Your Worth Beyond Obligation, sat on the display table, its cover showing a silver key similar to my Italian pendant. "Financial independence isn't just about money," I told them, my voice steady with the confidence of someone who has walked through fire and emerged stronger. "It's about recognizing your inherent value and refusing to let anyone, even those you love, make you question it." The faces looking back at me were attentive, some nodding in recognition, others blinking back tears. These were women who understood what it meant to give too much, to lose themselves in the process of caring for others. 5 years ago, I continued, I stood at an airport, watching my family board a luxury vacation I had paid for, but wasn't welcome to join. Those 4 words, "only for family," shattered something in me. But they also awakened something far more powerful, the realization that I deserved better, that we all do. My consulting business had evolved over the years, growing from a part-time passion project into a full-fledged firm with 3 associates. We specialized in helping women navigate financial transitions, particularly those complicated by family dynamics. The book had been an unexpected extension of that work, a way to reach those who couldn't afford one-on-one consultation, but still needed guidance. True family, whether biological or chosen, uplifts you, I said, making eye contact with different members of the audience. It doesn't drain. You dry and then demand more. It doesn't measure your worth by what you can provide. It sees you, values you, and respects your boundaries. After the talk, I signed books and spoke individually with women who shared snippets of their own stories. The sister who constantly borrowed money but never paid it back. The adult children who expected financial rescues without making changes. The aging parents who wielded guilt like a weapon. To each, I offered not just financial strategies, but the emotional validation many had never received. Yes, it's okay to set boundaries. No, you're not selfish for protecting yourself. Yes, real love can exist without financial entanglement. As the last attendee left, Hannah approached from where she'd been sitting in the back row. Not bad for someone who once couldn't say no to save her life, she teased, helping me gather my materials. I smiled. I had a good teacher. You did the hard work, she countered. I just provided occasional reality checks. We walked together to the parking lot, the late spring sunshine warm on our shoulders. Hannah was 7 months pregnant with her first child, her academic career thriving alongside her new journey into motherhood. Still on for dinner tomorrow? She asked as we reached our cars. Ben's been experimenting with that new pasta maker, and Riley wants to show you her science project. Wouldn't miss it, I promised. Hannah's daughter had become our honorary niece, a bright-eyed 8-year-old who shared her mother's curls and her father's quieter temperament. My relationship with my own family had evolved into something I never could have predicted. Jason and I had established a genuine friendship, meeting monthly for lunch and talking openly about everything from his growing insurance business to my occasional doubts about expanding my firm. His wedding the previous year had been a joyful occasion, unmarred by family tension. My parents had mellowed with age and health challenges. My father, particularly, had made efforts to know the woman I'd become rather than clinging to the daughter he thought he'd had. My mother remained more reserved, but genuine in her interest in my life and supportive in ways that didn't involve money or obligation. And Elaine, Elaine had been the greatest surprise. Our initial coffee after my wedding had been awkward, tense with unspoken history. But it had led to another, and then another. Slowly, cautiously, we had begun rebuilding, not the dysfunctional relationship of our past, but something new, grounded in mutual respect. Now a licensed social worker specializing in addiction recovery, Elaine had found her calling helping others break destructive patterns. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but we'd learned to acknowledge it with rueful smiles rather than recrimination. Just last month, she had joined Ben and me for dinner, bringing her new boyfriend, a kind, steady contractor who looked at her with genuine admiration. Watching them together, I had felt a quiet satisfaction. We had both found partners who valued us for ourselves, not what we could provide. As I drove home from the book signing, I reflected on the journey of the past 5 years. The betrayal at the airport had been painful, yes, but it had also been necessary. The breaking point that forced me to recognize and change patterns that were slowly destroying me. Ben was in the backyard when I arrived home, kneeling beside our vegetable garden with our 3-year-old daughter, Sophia. They were planting tomato seedlings, Sophia's small hands patting the soil, with serious concentration. "Mommy," she called, spotting me at the gate. "We're making food grow." "I see that," I said, joining them in the grass. "You're doing a wonderful job." Ben leaned over to kiss me, leaving a smudge of dirt on my cheek. "How was the signing?" "Good. Full house. Lots of women who needed to hear they're not alone." He nodded, understanding. "You're changing lives, you know. One conversation at a time." Later, after Sophia was tucked into bed with stories and songs, Ben and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. Our home, a comfortable 4-bedroom in a leafy neighborhood, was filled with books, art from our travels, and the organized chaos of family life. Nothing extravagant, but everything meaningful. "I had a call from the, publisher today," I mentioned, resting my head against his shoulder. "They want to discuss a second book." "That's fantastic," Ben said. "Do you have a topic in mind?" "I've been thinking about focusing on rebuilding after betrayal. Not just financial betrayal, but any kind of profound breach of trust. How to discern when reconciliation is possible and healthy versus when permanent separation is the wisest choice." "You certainly have the expertise," he observed, "both professional and personal." I nodded, watching the last light fade from the sky. It's strange to think how differently things might have turned out. If they hadn't excluded me from that trip, I might still be bankrolling their lives, growing more resentful but never finding the courage to break free. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, Ben mused. Not because the pain was good, but because it forced growth that couldn't have happened otherwise. Exactly. I turned to look at him. This man who had entered my life just when I was learning to stand alone, who had supported without smothering, loved without demanding. I wouldn't change any of it now, not even the hardest parts. The next day was Saturday, our family day. After breakfast, we took Sophia to the park, then visited the farmer's market for fresh produce and flowers. In the afternoon, we had a visitor, my father, who had started a tradition of monthly grandpa days when Sophia was born. I watched from the kitchen window as he helped her build a fairy house from twigs and leaves, his once rigid demeanor softened by her laughter. Ben came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Penny, for your thoughts," he murmured. "I was just thinking about family," I said. "How it can be both the source of our deepest wounds and our greatest healing." He nodded against my hair. "The difference lies in whether love is used as a weapon or a balm." That evening, after my father had gone and Sophia was asleep, I sat at my desk to begin outlining the new book. On a whim, I opened my journal from 5 years ago, turning to those raw, painful entries written in the aftermath of betrayal. The contrast between then and now was stark. Not because all was perfect, but because I had learned to navigate imperfection with clarity and strength rather than fear and desperation. I opened a new document and typed a working title, Beyond Easy. Betrayal, Rebuilding Trust, Reclaiming Joy. Beneath it, I added a subtitle, A Guide to Healing When Those You Love Have Hurt You Most. Then I began to write the introduction. 5 years ago, I stood frozen in an airport terminal as my family boarded a luxury vacation I had paid for, my sister's words still ringing in my ears. "Sorry, Natalie. This trip is only for family." In that moment of, exclusion, something broke inside me, but something else was born. A determination to reclaim my worth, to rebuild my life on foundations of mutual respect rather than one-sided giving. This is not a story of revenge. When their bills piled up and they called begging for help, I could have taken satisfaction in their distress. Instead, I found power in a different response. Only for family. Remember? Those words weren't meant to wound, but to establish a boundary that should have existed long ago. The journey from betrayal to healing isn't linear. It involves anger, grief, confusion, and eventually, if we're fortunate, clarity. Sometimes it leads to reconciliation, sometimes to separation, and often to something in between. A measured relationship built on new terms rather than old. Patterns. What I've learned along the way is this. True family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by love that uplifts rather than depletes, by respect that acknowledges boundaries rather than trampling them, by connections that enhance your life rather than diminishing it. Your worth isn't measured by what you give or what you endure. It exists independently of others' ability to recognize it. And when you finally understand that truth, when you feel it in your bones, no one can ever take it from you again. I sat back, rereading what I'd written. The words felt right, honest without being bitter, hopeful without being naive. They reflected not just my journey, but the universal struggle to find balance between giving and self-preservation, between forgiveness and self-respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. Just wanted to say I'm proud of how well your book is doing. You're helping a lot of people find their voice. I smiled, appreciating the simple acknowledgement from someone who had once tried to silence me. Thank you. That means a lot. Later, as Ben and I prepared for bed, he noticed my contemplative mood. Everything okay? He asked, drawing me into his arms. More than okay, I assured him. I was just thinking about how far we've all come. My family, me, all of us. A remarkable journey, he agreed. The most important part wasn't cutting them off, I reflected. It was learning that I had value beyond what I could give. That lesson changed everything. How I saw myself, how I allowed others to treat me, what I was willing to accept. In any relationship. Ben nodded, understanding as always. The greatest gift you can give yourself is knowing your worth. And the greatest gift you can give others, I added, is treating them according to theirs. As we settled into sleep, I thought of all the women I'd spoken with that day, each carrying her own version of my story. I thought of my daughter, growing up watching her mother stand firm in her value. I thought of my family, both born and chosen, and the complex, imperfect, precious bonds that connected us. The phrase that had once wounded me so deeply, only for family, had transformed over time. It was no longer a weapon of exclusion, but a reminder of a profound truth, that family, in its truest sense, is built on mutual care, respect, and love. And that kind of family, the kind worth belonging to, includes only those who see your true worth and honor it as carefully as their own.